The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Welcome. I am in Las Vegas, Nevada, the site of yesterday's first Democratic national debate. Lewis is joining me from Boston, Massachusetts. We're going to do the best we can as far as the technical situation, and apologies in advance for anything that unfortunately doesn't go as well as we would like. So let's get right into it, Lewis. Yesterday, the debate. General impressions. We're going to go through this in a lot of detail today. General impressions. What needed to happen? Hillary Clinton needed to remind people, in spite of Bernie Sanders getting more and more attention, why she has been and remains the front runner. And Bernie Sanders, on his part, needed to get more people to hear about him. And show why he's a real alternative to Hillary Clinton. The other three, Martin O'Malley, Lincoln Chafee, and Jim Webb, needed to do something to get people to pay attention to them, and we'll talk about whether they achieved that. The biggest contrast, Lewis, to the Republican debates, and we should have expected this, I did expect it, and it was very obvious, was that there were actual issues being discussed by people who weren't just attacking each other. It was an actual debate. It was a political debate.
That's true, and there was still some sensationalism, right? I mean, in some ways, the questions Anderson Cooper was asking some of them were very similar to the questions asked in the Republican debate, like, people are saying this about you, address this, that type of thing. But yes, there was actual policy debate, which is good.
They did their introductions. Lincoln Chafee said, we should decide based on experience and character, and I have the experience and the character, so vote for me. Jim Webb said, money is corrupting politics in both parties. Pick the person with the record, and I have the record. Martin O'Malley said, I'm running on my record, and listed his accomplishments. Bernie Sanders going the route of the middle class is not doing well. New income being created by the poor and middle class is going disproportionately to the very rich, and we need to fix that. And he touched on climate change, he touched on incarceration, and then lastly Hillary Clinton saying her entire life has been about evening the odds. Taxes are too low on the rich, we need to raise the minimum wage. Racial and economic inequality need to be dealt with. Hillary Clinton, to me, Lewis, sounded by far the most rehearsed, and at the same time her populist-sounding message, I have to believe, was influenced at least a little by Bernie Sanders' presence in this race.
Yeah, Hillary, to me, and I know I've said it before, I don't really like Hillary. I'm hoping that didn't, cloud this at all for me. But she, of course, seemed the most rehearsed, but to me, she also sounded the most insincere a lot of the time.
Bernie Sanders not backing off of the Democratic Socialist label, and then Jim Webb, and this was a theme throughout, looked generally confused, and what he was saying also was confusing. It wasn't clear to me why he was there. He's not really polling in any significant way, and a lot of his ideas are completely out of step with Democrats, but he was there, and that was sort of the setup for the debate. Let's discuss issues that were mentioned and discussed during this presidential debate. There were so many actual issues discussed, and it is such a relief, Lewis, that unlike in the Republican debate, we actually have stuff to talk about. I want to start with gun control, which is a top issue right now. Particularly in the wake of mass gun violence that continues to happen. Bernie Sanders made it clear that he has and continues to support a ban on assault weapons. He wants to close the gun show loophole. He wants more extensive background checks, and he does not want to shield gun companies from lawsuits after shootings. But he explained that infamous vote years ago by saying that gun shops, individual gun shops, which legally sell a gun to someone that later is used in a crime, should not be held liable. And that's actually a pretty reasonable position. Agree or disagree with whatever gun policies are in place, if an individual gun shop is selling a gun to a legal purchaser, I agree with Bernie Sanders that attacking that small business is not the solution to the gun violence problem.
With a lot of political issues, we could look at it this way, right? I mean, are you going to look at, I don't know, a billionaire or some company that pays nothing in taxes and say, how dare you Well, no, we would if we were in their position too, because the system has allowed it, and so it doesn't really make sense to sue a gun shop in that way.
Hillary Clinton said that Bernie Sanders is not tough enough on guns, that we need to stand up against the NRA, but when she actually listed her policies, they were essentially identical to Bernie Sanders, and that was a theme in this debate. But Hillary Clinton using language to suggest that she has a different view than Bernie, when in reality she has the same view as Bernie. Martin O'Malley accused Bernie Sanders of pandering to the NRA, no real evidence that he has done that, and it was kind of funny that people were sort of bragging about how low their ratings were from the NRA. It's kind of like an anti-endorsement. How much does the NRA dislike me? So that was on gun control. Russia, Syria, and foreign policy. Hillary Clinton said it's time to stand up to Putin's bullying in Syria, and that we have to tell the Russians they need to help end this conflict, not escalate it by going after Putin's, rather Bashar al-Assad's opposition, which is what it seems that Vladimir Putin is doing. Bernie Sanders said this is a quagmire in a quagmire. That's a quote from Bernie Sanders on this issue. And he said that there's no clear plan here. Fighting ISIS while trying to overthrow Assad, this doesn't really make sense, and being very clear that the U.S. will not get involved other than in helping to put together a coalition. That transitioned into Hillary Clinton's vote in favor of letting President Bush take the U.S. to war in Iraq. And this continues to come up, Lewis, for Hillary Clinton. She has been successfully redirecting without really addressing that she did have the same intelligence Bernie had when he opposed the conflict in Iraq, but it keeps coming up in a number of the candidates, Lewis, pointing out to Hillary Clinton where she was on that vote. And I don't think she's good at deflecting, but she's not had any kind of real good explanation.
No, I mean, generally, her I wouldn't say foreign policy. I mean, basically, when it comes to U.S. intervention and violence and aggressive action, that was brought into question, and I think that's important. And it seems like she probably is, strangely enough, the most militaristic of the candidates.
Other than Jim Webb, probably, who at one point kind of laughed about the guy he killed in Vietnam.
Yes, that was that was an odd situation. But yes, perhaps Jim is up there with her, but I think that she's wrong on a lot of these issues.
Bernie, lastly, given the opportunity to say, when would you use military force? You seem to always be against it. And he said, well, I voted in favor of holding Osama bin Laden accountable in Afghanistan. I voted to go into Kosovo and stop the ethnic cleansing. When our country or allies are directly threatened, he supports coalition action, not unilateral. So that was interesting as well. Who's the biggest national security threat? Threat to the U.S.'s national security. This was a pretty quick one, and it's interesting, and we'll sort of append it to the foreign policy discussion. Martin O'Malley said it's a nuclear Iran. Hillary Clinton said nuclear materials and weapons in the wrong hands. Bernie Sanders actually went in the direction of saying climate change is the biggest national security threat. Jim Webb said China, cyber warfare against the U.S., and the military situation in the Middle East. And I actually missed what Lincoln Chafee said. I was busy making notes. So kind of an interesting little question to see what the top issue is. I don't know that we gathered that much about it other than Bernie Sanders taking a different approach to what we normally hear, which is a military concern. He's going in the climate change direction as national security, and Jim Webb just seemingly obsessed with China.
Yeah, well, there's plenty of cyber attacks happening from China. I don't know if that's the biggest threat to us as a country and as people, but Bernie is right. Climate change is a huge issue, and I just don't think there's probably no other candidate, Republican, of course not Republican, or Democratic, who will even enter the race in the future, who would ever say anything like that, and Bernie will.
Right, absolutely. Then it was interesting on economic inequality and the economy. This was one of the more interesting parts of the debate, in my opinion. Bernie Sanders was able to sort of lay out that plan where he talks about creating jobs by rebuilding infrastructure, raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour, which the Democratic Party has adopted now as part of their national platform. He talked about pay equity for women, and gender issues essentially didn't come up in this debate, and I'm curious what your thought is about that. He talked about making public college and university tuition free and breaking up the big banks. This became a real issue of contention where Bernie was very clear that he wants to break up the big banks and reinstate a sort of modern Glass-Steagall. Hillary Clinton said she has a 5-point plan on this issue. She said that Democrats are generally better than Republicans on this issue. But what was very interesting is that Hillary Clinton does not have the same position as Bernie Sanders on the big banks, but she made it seem as though she does. She said, listen, she avoided commenting on reinstating some kind of Glass-Steagall. To separate investment banking activity from commercial banking activity. But she sort of left it open and said, I would set it up so that we can choose to break up big banks if they pose a particular risk. To somebody who doesn't follow this very closely, they might have come away thinking that Bernie and Hillary have the same position on this, but they actually have drastically different positions on the big banks.
Yeah, and if you wanted to, you could probably find some really interesting things when it comes to donations in those departments as well.
Well, that's exactly what, in the conversation we had last night at dinner after the debate, that's what everybody was saying, which is follow the money on that particular issue.
That's right. And Bernie is right. What Hillary is going to do, I don't even need to hear what her exact proposal is because it's not going to be good enough. Bernie's really the guy for this.
Martin O'Malley basically said, I like what Bernie Sanders would do, and I already did most of it in Maryland, and would like Lincoln Chafee wants some kind of Glass-Steagall to separate investment banking and commercial banking. Jim Webb just mentioned that he supported a windfall tax for executives for a long time. So that was absolutely one of the more interesting parts of the debate. Climate change. Martin O'Malley a bunch of times mentioned 100% clean electric grid by 2050. Jim Webb completely out of place there, right? I mean, pro-coal, pro-offshore drilling, pro-Keystone XL, pro-nuclear power. I was just confused as to what he was doing there.
Well, he does differ from his old party on a few issues, right? Is it enough? I don't know. Why is he there? He certainly didn't get equal time. So I think we know how CNN viewed the whole situation.
Yeah, and as the debate went on, it was funny how at first they were sort of pretending like they cared about what Lincoln Chafee and Jim Webb had to say, and towards the end, they were basically just ignoring them.
Yes, it was really obvious, and you could tell that they were getting pretty frustrated about it.
Hillary Clinton just basically saying China and India need to be involved in whatever the climate change solution ultimately is, and Bernie Sanders again saying climate change is a national security issue. We need to deal with campaign finance reform. We need to deal with the connection between that and funding of the Republican Party, et cetera. So he was able to, I think, make some good points on that issue. Recreational marijuana, one of the last things I want to talk about. Bernie Sanders asked if in Nevada he would vote in favor of the recreational marijuana ballot initiative. He said that he would, and he said that incarceration and the criminal justice angle are really what need to be tackled. Hillary Clinton, again, given the opportunity to say yes, that she would be in favor of recreational marijuana, and she said no. And she said 1 year in Colorado to gather data is just not really enough. Needs to know more. She does support the use of medical marijuana. So, again, another distinction between Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton. And then last thing I want to talk about, and then we'll pause and then afterwards sum up some of the key points that are there to take away. Religion. There was essentially no discussion of religion in this debate, which I think shows that the Democratic voters don't care about the religion of these candidates, as they should not, because we do have separation of church and state. Hillary Clinton used the phrase God-given twice during the debate, and Bernie Sanders mentioned Pope Francis. That was the extent of religion in the Democratic debate.
As it should be. Religion should not be discussed at all, really, unless somehow it ties to a very important policy issue.
Yes, which I would say if there was a question about the use of religion to exempt oneself from laws, that would have been a totally valid thing. Remember, not that long ago, in a Democratic debate, we did have that question of what's your favorite Bible verse, and I was glad that that didn't rear its head yesterday.
Yes, although I would have liked to hear a question or two that would have given us some insight into the personal lives of the candidates, because I do enjoy that now and then.
Okay, let's take a pause. Afterwards, Lewis, I want to talk about the differences between Bernie and Hillary that surfaced from this debate, the attacks on Hillary Clinton, as well as whether Republican ideas were discussed during this debate or not. And then we'll sort of discuss who we think did best in this debate.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
All right, so we're going to keep talking about yesterday's Democratic presidential debate. Remember, davidpakman.com/membership. Stephen Kaplan is today's new member of the day. Thanks to him, you can join Stephen and support independent media, davidpakman.com/membership. So what differences surfaced yesterday between Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton? We can sort of temporarily at least put aside what they've said in the past and focus on what differences we were able to glean from yesterday's debate. Hillary Clinton made it clear that she agrees with Bernie Sanders about inequality, but she's more sort of bullish on capitalism, right? She said the middle class through capitalism is what built this country. We really don't want to be more like Denmark, as Bernie Sanders suggested. It was an opportunity to sort of distance herself with a sort of more moderate-sounding rhetoric and language. Of course, then we got to the Iraq War vote, which came up several times. Bernie Sanders reminding everybody he voted against that authorization. And Hillary Clinton voted for it. This is still an issue. As I mentioned earlier, Bernie said he wants a modern Glass-Steagall and wants to break up big banks, whereas Hillary Clinton doesn't. And she did a very, very good job at making it sort of sound like her opinion is the same as Bernie Sanders, but it really is not on that issue. On the free college tuition, Bernie said tuition-free public colleges and universities. Hillary Clinton said not that, because she doesn't want the kids of rich people getting free college tuition, which was a really kind of absurd thing to say because, I mean, Donald Trump's kids are not going to state college anyway, right? It was a very strange thing to say. She doesn't want any of it because Donald Trump's kids might get free tuition at a state school.
Well, the really dumb thing about that is that she doesn't seem to understand the entire idea behind this, and that is the rich are paying more taxes.
Yeah.
And that is part of what's helping to pay for people to go to school. So he's paying more than most people. So he kind of, in a way, would be paying for his kids to go to college.
Well, and not only that, she again came up with a very crafty way to say, I'm still in favor of people ultimately receiving free, no tuition, or coming out of college at a public school with no debt, but they would be forced to work 10 hours a week in order to do that, and colleges need to drop their costs. That's a drastically different scenario than what Bernie is proposing. But again, to the sort of casual observer of politics, it might sound like, hey, both Bernie and Hillary want the same thing. Not the case. And this is where I think Bernie did not do well in yesterday's debate, which is he was able to present what his ideas are very well. Hillary Clinton clearly prepared to be able to respond to what Bernie says in a way that makes it sound like she basically wants the same outcome, even though that's not exactly the reality and many times is very far from the reality. And that's what Bernie wasn't able to come back at and say, hold on a second, you're using rhetoric that sounds similar to what I'm saying, but what you're actually proposing is very different. And that's where I think Hillary Clinton did very well yesterday.
Yeah, Bernie, you're right. And the statement about Donald Trump's kids, I mean, in some people's eyes, that could have made Bernie look really bad. And so she did a good job at that. But yes, I mean, just go back and look at her voting record and follow the money. It's painfully obvious she is a completely different candidate than Bernie Sanders.
Other differences between Bernie and Hillary on Social Security. Bernie Sanders, very clear, he wants to expand Social Security, and the way to do it is you lift the cap, the income cap, on Social Security tax. Currently, if you make $1 million a year or $1 billion a year, you pay the exact same number of dollars of Social Security tax as if you make, I believe it's $118,000, maybe it's up to $121,000. Bernie said, let's lift that. Hillary said something very different, which is she wants to enhance Social Security, not expand, for the poorest recipients. This is a very different approach. Hillary is taking a needs-based approach to Social Security. Bernie is at a very different point, saying, no. Regardless of your need, you're entitled to more based on what society should provide. This is a drastically different view. But again, if you heard, oh, Bernie wants to expand and Hillary wants to enhance for those who need it the most, well, maybe that sounds kind of similar. No, that's a very different position.
Could this be could this be a bad thing for Hillary? I know she wants to make it seem like she's as progressive as Bernie Sanders, but when she says things like this and makes it sound like her ideas are similar, I mean, is that going to pull any votes away from Bernie, for her?
I think it is, because if you think about it, for the people who are the more casual observers of politics, they'll say, well, Hillary's positions sound pretty similar to Bernie's, and I think she probably has a better shot, so I'm going to vote for her. But she's still using language that signals her big corporate donors and Wall Street that she's not going to do the same thing that Bernie Sanders is doing. So I think that it is a very good strategy for Hillary. Lastly, Bernie, yes on recreational marijuana. Hillary Clinton, no on recreational marijuana. Let's talk about the attacks on Hillary Clinton. First, and let me be clear, most of the attacks were sort of pointed questions coming from the panelists. There were no real attacks from the other candidates, except for sometimes saying, yeah, that probably could have been dealt with differently. Does she say whatever she needs to say to get elected? She said no. And she said, for example, with TPP, she was hoping it would be the gold standard. When she finally saw what it was, she realized it's not the gold standard, changed her view, no big deal. Lots of references to Hillary making decisions based on polls. The other candidates didn't say it directly, but they would say, I would not make decisions based on what's popular in the polls. And they would sort of glance at Hillary Clinton. Not a direct attack, but that was a theme. Benghazi. Martin O'Malley said we need better intelligence on the ground. The reality, though, was that nobody said Hillary Clinton was acutely wrong or guilty or liable of everything. Even Jim Webb, who has been a very harsh critic of Hillary Clinton's on Benghazi, said that we really just need to generally look at how we gather intelligence in places that are hostile. This is a good thing. The Democrats should not play into Republican strategy by making things like Benghazi, and the email scandal also came up as well. It was a mistake, but this is not a huge deal. Big applause line from Bernie Sanders when he said, quite frankly, I'm sick of hearing about Hillary Clinton's damn emails. Those were the right approaches for the Democrats, Lewis, because don't give any fuel to the fire that Republicans are trying to build here.
Yeah, Benghazi is still, unfortunately, it's still an issue, and you don't want to attack each other and kill each other, and then after the primaries, have the Republicans use that as ammunition. I think best just to avoid it.
How would you differ from President Obama? This was fascinating and very telling. Lincoln Chafee said, well, I would end wars and I would stop this failed program of training soldiers in Syria. Martin O'Malley said he would really follow through protecting the Main Street economy from Wall Street, and he would reinstate a modern Glass-Steagall. Hillary Clinton first said, well, it's obvious how I would be different, referring to the fact that she's a woman. That was not her best moment. Anderson Cooper smartly came back and said, well, other than being a woman, how about on policy? And Hillary Clinton did not issue any actual difference between what she would do and what President Obama would do. And this was a theme throughout the debate. She said, I would go beyond what President Obama did. I would expand on the work that he started. Hillary Clinton did not indicate in the entire debate one way in which she would do something differently from President Obama. She said, Obama, I would do even more of Obama-type stuff.
Yes, it was a terrible answer. I cringed when she said, well, I'll be a woman, that'll be different, because it's really insulting to me watching when clearly the question is about policy. Yes, that was probably her worst moment, and maybe it's not a bad answer for people who are Obamatons and people who love what Obama has done.
Bernie Sanders said we need a total revolution to upend the power that Wall Street corporate media and big corporations have. And then Jim Webb said, yeah, Bernie Sanders' revolution is not going to happen. And by the way, Congress would never pay for it anyway. Again, Jim Webb sort of just seeming out of place. Very interesting question. How would you differ from President Obama? Republican ideas were not really mentioned very much, which I think, again, is good. This is a debate with a different spectrum. Hillary mentioned Republicans and their politically motivated investigations into Benghazi and her emails. Bernie Sanders mentioned that the economy was a disaster under George W. Bush. Martin O'Malley referred to Donald Trump as a carnival barker immigrant hater, which was a sort of funny moment. Bernie Sanders talking about the fossil fuel industry funding the Republican Party, which leads to climate denial. But really, the Republican ideas were not mentioned very much. Who won and who lost this debate? I think that Lincoln Chafee and Jim Webb did absolutely nothing for themselves. Martin O'Malley did actually come off pretty well, and a lot of focus groups thought that he may have won the debate. The problem is he just has no shot. I mean, at this point, he's just so far behind that he really has no shot. Hillary Clinton did very well. She made the best thing Hillary Clinton can do is make herself seem as populist as Bernie Sanders without actually having to say stuff to alienate the big funders that she has. And that she was able to do. If a voter believes Hillary Clinton is essentially as populist as Bernie Sanders, they may well vote for her as a pragmatic decision because they think she has a better shot of winning. Now, Bernie Sanders has a name recognition angle here. Just by being there on the national stage, he may improve in the polls because now more people know what he's about. It is very hard for me to say who is going to come out on top in the next week of polling here. Hillary Clinton did what she had to do. Bernie Sanders did a lot of what he had to do. We'll just have to see what impact it has.
Yeah, I think I'm going to disagree with you slightly on Jim Webb. I think he did better than you think he did. I think he sounded decisive on a lot of issues, and on many issues, I think he was nuanced and he knew what he was talking about.
I don't know, but he was nuanced on issues that seemed a little bit out of left field. The obsession with China, I'm just not sure about that. We'll see what people say. We'll see what the poll reaction is. But you thought he did better than I did, apparently.
I do. Of course, you're right, though. It seems like he has no shot despite that. But I cringed at a lot of what Hillary said. I thought that Bernie did the best.
All right, let's take a break. Send us your thoughts on the debate. I'm on Twitter @dpacman. Lewis is on Twitter @LewisMontano.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
All right, let's take a pause from talking about yesterday's first Democratic presidential debate and do a couple of other stories. Ben Carson in second place might be crazier than Donald Trump in first place, and now they are virtually tied. Last poll I saw had Donald Trump at 24, Ben Carson at 23. As crazy as it is that Donald Trump has been and is sort of still in the lead, it is arguably more crazy that Ben Carson is in second place. The man is an absolute lunatic, and people are starting to realize it. Eugene Robinson in the Washington Post said, the craziest thing is not that Donald Trump is in the lead, it's that Dr. Ben Carson, who truly seems to have lost his mind, is in second place and gaining fast. Recently, Ben Carson's highlights include saying that gun control was to blame for the Holocaust, that taking away the right to arm ourselves is more dangerous, more devastating than bullet holes in people. He told this strange story of when he was at a Popeyes fried chicken joint and a gunman came in, and he deflected the interest that the gunman had in him by saying the guy behind the counter is the guy that you want. Just a very strange story. He claims that Palestinian leader Mahmoud Abbas, Iranian leader Ayatollah Khamenei, and Vladimir Putin got to know each other in Moscow in 1968. There's no evidence to suggest that that's true at all. He's compared the Affordable Care Act to slavery. He's called President Obama a psychopath. He doesn't believe established uncontroversial science on evolution and climate change. He's a doctor and thinks the Earth is 6,000 years old. He wants to repeal net neutrality. He cited prison rape as evidence that being gay is a choice. And he supports a sort of religious tithing flat-type tax. Ben Carson in second place may well be more insane than Donald Trump in first.
Maybe, but I feel I have this comfort. I have the sense of comfort that everything is going to be okay when Ben Carson and Donald Trump are the front runners in the Republican Party, you know?
In the sense that you think their presence there will ultimately help the Democratic nominee?
Yeah, I just think to myself, because, I'm usually pretty pessimistic, but I think to myself, there's no possible way either of these guys could become president, right?
Well, yesterday there was some talk at dinner with a few of the other media people here about if Marco Rubio or Ted Cruz end up being the nominees, that is just a guaranteed win for whoever is the ultimate Democratic nominee. But that's always kind of dangerous, right? There's this idea that the crazier or more inexperienced that one party's nominee is, the more obvious it is that the other party will win. Yet that might not happen. And remember, when state Supreme Courts get involved in recounts, you never know who could end up winning.
Yeah, and so I think, we've said that Rubio actually seems pretty reasonable when you look at the Republican Party. I don't know what would happen if he were the nominee, but I'm pretty sure that Ben Carson and Donald Trump will never be the president.
During an appearance at a John Huntsman No Labels event, a woman in the audience named Lauren Batchelder started antagonizing Donald Trump. And it turns out that this was not just some random member of the audience. She's actually a paid political operative of the Republican Party and happens to be on Jeb Bush's staff. CNN instantly made this into a big controversy. And within minutes of her questioning of Donald Trump at this event, CNN started editing sound bites and framing a narrative around this. It was a sort of forced controversy. I'm going to play the video of it for you, and then we'll discuss.
So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you can prove me wrong, but I don't think that you're a friend to women.
I knew I shouldn't have picked her.
But the Donald plunged on.
I respect women incredibly. I have given women more opportunity than I would say virtually anybody in the construction industry.
Trump invoked his wife. He invoked his daughter. He invoked his mother.
My mother was one of the great people of the world, maybe the greatest ever.
Did Mom ever stare at you like this, Donald?
I respect women. I love women. I cherish women. You know, Hillary Clinton said he shouldn't cherish.
Well, if it's all the same to you, Mr. Trump, I'd rather you stop cherishing women and start respecting women.
I do cherish. I cherish women.
And just when Trump thought it was safe to go on to the next question...
If you become president, will a woman make the same as a man? And do I get to choose what I do with my body?
You're going to make the same if you do as good a job, and I happen to be pro-life.
As for what his questioner did with her body, hands on hips, eyebrow cocked.
So it didn't take long, Lewis, to figure out that Lauren Batchelder was not some random woman in the audience who was concerned about Donald Trump. She's a current staffer for Senator Kelly Ayotte. She is also working in New Hampshire on behalf of Jeb Bush's campaign. If you look at her LinkedIn profile, she is a Jeb for President staffer. As soon as this came out, and I guess she thought, oh, I'll just do this and no one will figure out who I am, people started finding her social media accounts and her LinkedIn profile, and she started just haphazardly deleting anything she could from her Twitter profile, totally backfiring. And the only question is whether CNN was in on it, right? Did CNN just say, hey, this is great. This woman got into this Donald Trump event, started asking questions about Donald Trump and gender, and it's just all very good and controversial? Or was CNN in some way involved in getting her in there and fabricating this controversy? I really don't know. We may never know, but no waste of an opportunity to fabricate a controversy.
Hey, it's good TV, Dave. It's good for ratings, and it's foolish on her part to think that this would just that her background would go under the radar. I mean, this day and age, it's almost impossible to get away with something like this if if information about you is out there.
Yeah, it wasn't likely to work in terms of getting away. It is interesting, though, that whether CNN was involved in it or not, this is obviously a Jeb Bush staffer. And the idea that Jeb Bush's campaign has staffers, and we don't know if it was at the direction of the campaign or just she came up with this brilliant idea on her own, sort of planting themselves in Donald Trump events, it tells us something about the internal dynamics of that race.
I think maybe they're a little bit worried about Donald Trump. So, good for them. I mean, this happens. This is politics as usual, but maybe they are worried.
They probably should be, right? I mean, it's understandable that they may be panicking when they see Donald Trump in first place, 24%. Ben Carson, a guy whose connection to reality seems to be fading day after day. When they collectively have nearly 50% of the vote, I would probably be panicking too, and I'd consider sending plants to Donald Trump events.
Well, I think Jeb has done all right with some of that super PAC money and all of that. We're starting to see the Jeb Bush advertisements all over the place now, so we'll see if money can bring him to the top.
After the break, I want to talk about the results from the big Planned Parenthood investigation, which I don't want to spoil it for you. were pretty uneventful. And we'll also talk about terror group Hamas praising recent violence in Israel, and another one of these very strange concealed carry, self-defense gun use stories that you might find entertaining but is actually quite sad.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Okay, let's talk about sort of conclusion to another one of these so-called scandal investigations. You may remember on Benghazi, investigation after investigation, basically designed to criticize and bring down Hillary Clinton's poll numbers. We even heard from Kevin McCarthy, the failed Speaker of the House candidate, that that was at least one of the goals of the continued panels on Benghazi, was just to hurt Hillary Clinton. Republican Congressman Jason Chaffetz has now admitted that the Republican investigation into Planned Parenthood was also a complete dud. It uncovered absolutely no wrongdoing whatsoever. Huffington Post's Jennifer Bendery reported that the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee found nothing. Quote, did I look at the finances and have a hearing specifically as to the revenue portion and how they spend? Yes. Was there any wrongdoing? I didn't find any. But the investigations are not done into Planned Parenthood. Jason Chaffetz saying, I think there will continue to be investigations. Sure, why not? I mean, for as long as they can continue to pour millions into these investigations that after time uncover nothing, it almost doesn't matter that no wrongdoing was found. The headlines that investigations are taking place is hugely beneficial.
Yeah, just saying there's an investigation is good for your agenda, right? Because that strikes fear in the heart of Americans. And, just like when someone is accused of a crime, kind of your first reaction is just to say, whoa, hey, looks like they're in some serious stuff here. They probably did something wrong.
Yeah, why would someone be accused of something so serious if they didn't do anything wrong? And the investigations don't actually – it doesn't even matter if they ultimately convince people that any of the allegations are true. If they just convince people that Planned Parenthood is controversial, that's good enough. And that's the biggest scam here, right? 97% of what Planned Parenthood does is STD testing, contraception, family planning. 3% is abortion and abortion-related services. Federal funds cannot be used for that. And by the way, even that 3% in most countries at our level of development, abortion services, not controversial, not political issues between individuals and their doctors, and it's just going to keep going. We have it appears I can't even figure out exactly how many concurrent investigations there are right now into Planned Parenthood. It appears that there's at least 4, and maybe they could find a few more to concoct.
The money's there, so they'll just keep throwing money at it, and it's probably having an impact on voters and Americans. It's sad, it really is just a huge waste of time.
The recent wave of violence in Israel shows no signs of lessening at all. At least 3 people were killed and more than a dozen were injured in a series of stabbing and shooting attacks in Israel. 2 people were killed when 2 gunmen opened fire and stabbed passengers on a bus in a Jerusalem neighborhood. Medical units said over 15 were injured in the attack. One of the alleged bus attackers was shot and killed, while the second one was captured. Then police say that a driver rammed his car into a bus station before getting out and starting to stab people on a Jerusalem street. And then in a central town in Israel, a suspect stabbed an Israeli at a bus station before being wrestled to the ground by bystanders. Of the 5 perpetrators so far, 2 were killed, 3 have been captured. And then Israeli police say that a Jewish Israeli man stabbed another Jew in northern Israel in a suspected failed revenge attack, which just shows you, Lewis, the scale of what's going on. That Jewish man thought he was attacking an Arab man as a revenge attack, and it turned out that it was another Jewish guy. I mean, just an utter disaster.
Yep. There are idiots in Israel too, Dave. They're everywhere. But I saw some of the video of that person driving into the bus stop, and it's just crazy, you know. And it's causing a media frenzy. And look at the comments on those articles on the internet, Dave. It's just insane what's happening.
It is insane, and just as insane is that terrorist group Hamas likes the attacks. They praise the attacks. They called the perpetrators heroes. The mayor of Jerusalem is calling on the Israeli government to act quickly and immediately in response to what's going on. There's already some people saying that these shootings and stabbings are sort of no big deal, that Israel really should not do much. It's just that, sometimes we have violence. I wonder if the reaction would be the same elsewhere, particularly when you have a terrorist group praising and supporting the violence. I think this again goes to that sort of double standard. Hey, listen, yeah, there's some stabbings, there's some shootings, but let's not really overreact here. And I think that attitude would be very different. We have evidence of that. We have proof of that. But it doesn't really matter to a lot of people. The perspective is different when this happens in Israel. And the sort of undertone is, hey, I'm not even sure that the existence of Israel is legitimate. Thus, I'm not even really sure that Israel should be doing anything about these stabbings or shootings, which is not a standard that would be applied to any other country I can think of.
No, and I think, if you were to actually talk to Israelis about this, they might say, look, violence is kind of a part of life over here. These things happen. There are the shellings, there are attacks, and that's where we are. I wonder if they're all aware of the reactions that are happening over here.
Yeah, that is a question, and I don't know the answer to it. A San Antonio, Texas man shot and killed his wife after mistaking her for an intruder. The man told police he heard noises coming from the front of the house about 4 a.m. Saturday. He saw a flash of light, grabbed the shotgun, went to investigate, saw a light and someone standing in the distance, so he fired a blast from the shotgun. Turns out he had shot his wife, 48-year-old Deborah Kelly. Police did try to resuscitate her, pronounced dead at the scene from a gunshot wound to the chest. A neighbor said, "It's horrible, horrible, and she was just a wonderful person. I have to believe that it was an accident, a very tragic accident." Authorities aren't sure whether the man is going to be charged in the fatal shooting. There might be no charges at all here. You might ask why. Well, Texas law permits homeowners to shoot intruders attempting to break into their home, and they are not obligated to retreat in situations where deadly force can be legally justified. So if he truly believed, even for a second, that his wife was a home invader, then he conceivably could be protected from the law. This is sort of absurd, right? And gun safety advocates are saying, you want to kill someone, you invite them over. Hey, I thought it was a different person. I know I was expecting Joe to come over, but I thought that this wasn't Joe. I thought this was a home invader, and I shot them. And this can be a valid defense.
Yeah, Texas has some crazy laws, just like Florida, and so I think, knowing Texas, he probably won't be charged, but he should be. I mean, I don't want a guy like this, Dave, I don't want him on the streets. I don't want him anywhere. He's a gun owner. He probably carries a gun, too, and he's got no common sense, and he's just a terrified man who could pull that trigger at any point.
Well, some of the details don't really make sense, right? The burglar was breaking into the front of the house. Okay, maybe not the most common thing, but fine. Let's go with that. He saw a light. What does that mean? Does that mean a flashlight or a street light? Burglars aren't usually that keen on starting to turn lights on, especially in homes that might be occupied. Whatever kind of light it was might suggest maybe it wasn't a home intruder. And then this comment that he saw the person just standing there in the distance, is that normally how burglars react? They have a flashlight, they come in the front door, and they just stand there when they're confronted by the homeowner. It's just not really adding up.
I think what we have here is just someone who's paranoid, right? Maybe he owns the guns because he's afraid of home intruders. And, when you're scared, you're not thinking rationally. And that might be what happened here. Or maybe he just wanted to kill his wife. I don't know.
Maybe wives must be armed if they get up in the middle of the night. If you can't sleep, insomnia, Lewis, may lead to having to defend yourself with a firearm in your own home just for safety's sake.
Yeah, but I don't think she stood a chance here. The craziest part is that he didn't even seem to say anything like, "What are you doing? Who's there?" Nothing of the sort. It was just point and shoot.
Right.
And
That detail, a lot of details he gave us, the light, standing in the distance, front door, whether anything was said, interestingly missing from the story that we're getting from all local media. On today's bonus show, Lewis, we will talk about Facebook paying almost no corporate taxes at all in the UK. An Egyptian TV anchor makes a big goof. And the UK has also banned hoverboards. Did hoverboards even exist in the UK? Lewis will tell us about all of that and more. DavidPakman.com/membership.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.